Kento Nanami. We know him as the most reliable grade 1 sorcerer, the hard-working type. He's pretty much what you want to be as a sorcerer if you weren't born with an overpowered curse technique or talent that makes you a special grade. And even though we know that he's typically incredibly skilled as a sorcerer, he never obtained his domain expansion, and he also can use simple domain, which means that if he gets caught in a domain, like he did with Maito, he's done for, and he knows it. So why did he never learn it? Maybe he just couldn't, because he never had a reason or drive to. Or maybe it was his technique that was just too plain to base a domain off of. Whatever the reason may be, Nanami doesn't have a domain, but we know that any sorcerer can develop one. So I asked myself, what could have been Nanami's domain expansion? And I came up with a couple of ideas, so here we go. First, we can theorize about the type of domain he could have. Because there are lethal domains that use their sure hit to immediately eliminate their opponent. These are very difficult to construct and maintain, which is why it's unlikely for Nanami to develop it like this. But if he did, I thought of one way to integrate his technique. Nanami's ratio technique lets him divide a target into 10 parts and forces a weak point at the 7:3 ratio. So how could we make this lethal? What if we make it so that every point on the target becomes a weak point? I know, that sounds kinda boring, but we're not done. My idea here is that the ratios become so small and precise, and the weak points are amplified so much to the point where the enemy just collapses under the weight of their own body. So this way, if you get caught in the domain, you're not only unable to move because you just couldn't support yourself, but your body also breaks apart entirely. The best way I could imagine this would be as like atmospheric pressure increasing. So it would feel like you're under hundreds of atmospheres of pressure and just crumble right there, because your joints basically just fall apart. And this is the best thing I came up with for a lethal domain. However, I think Nanami would have more like a rule-based domain, since they're much easier to construct and they still give you a massive advantage in a fight. So I feel like the sure hit effect would be something like just transferring information to the enemy, just how the domain works, similar to Hakari or Higuruma's domain. The way I imagined it is that the ratios Nanami creates, they're basically everywhere in the domain, not only on the people but also in the air, on objects. So it's similar to his technique extension, where he just creates a weak point on objects, which enables him to just destroy them easily. The idea here is that the ratios don't just create weak points, but it's built more like a combo system. So the more ratios you stack on top of each other and hit consecutively, the better your benefits get. So in this case, Nanami and the enemy both know if you had 5 ratios consecutively, you decrease the other's cursed energy output. You could even have something like cursed energy stealing. So if you had 10 ratios in a row and then hit the enemy, you steal like 20% of their cursed energy right there. And the catch here is that everyone inside the domain can use the ratios, but since Nanami is the one constructing the domain, only he can see them. So just by chance, the enemy could hit a weak point and manage to injure Nanami that way. And yeah, so the more ratios you hit and stack on top of each other, the better the combo gets. And you can pretty much do just whatever with this, like just get real creative with it. Or something else you could do is, if you miss the ratio, then there are consequences to that. You just don't hit as hard or anything else. Maybe you lose your curse technique and can't use it for just a little bit of time. And something else that I imagined, if you had like enough weak points consecutively, then you could forcibly get a black flash, like guarantee it. Create some form of binding vow that after hitting 20 ratios in the air or something and then hitting your enemy, you get a black flash. And yeah, I feel like with this would fit Nanami pretty well, because it's pretty fair, I think, since everyone can hit them, and it's not like an insta win. Like, Nanami still has to hit the enemy and they have a fighting chance. Since we know that the more lethal a domain expansion is, the harder it is to even just create or conceptualize. So something that's more fair for both people is going to be way easier to construct for Nanami. So even if he's not massively talented, he could just still create that. So I feel like the skill this domain would require to use and the benefits you get are pretty well balanced, and it's not so overpowered that the enemy has no chance to survive in the domain. So I feel like this is something that Nanami could have pulled off without being too difficult. So that's kind of what I came up with for the lethal and the rule-based domain. because I think the Nanami's Domain could have looked really cool. But yeah, with these you can pretty much do anything you want. It doesn't even have to involve the ratio technique. I wanted to do that, but it doesn't really matter. So if you have any cool ideas for what Nanami's Domain could have been, just write me like a comment about it, because I feel like you could just get so creative with this and do pretty much whatever. But yeah, just let me know what you think.